What the crap was that abomination? I'm a little terrified, to be honest.
Come on, sweetheart. Okay, come on. Here we go. Come on in.
And now I'm equal parts grossed out and impressed at his lack of a gag reflex.
Oh, she tickles going down there.
This is Mr. Meaty, a show on Nickelodeon that had a short run of nearly 40 15-minute episodes and a couple half-hour ones, but had large gaps between many new episodes. This led the show to air new content between 2005 to 2009 on Nickelodeon and later Nicktoons, where it eventually shriveled up and died like the terrible pup show that it was. But was it really a bad show? Yes, it wasn't good.
We're sending in a negotiator!
I'm not negotiating anything until
Snek
apologizes.
Okay, fine, it wasn't the worst show on Nickelodeon, but it doesn't mean it was that great in the first place. The show starred two high school students, Josh and Parker, who work at the fast food restaurant Mr. Meaty in the They're working under extreme conditions each episode thanks to their wimpy manager and the owner of the place, Mr. Carney. Oh my crap! He looks like the love child of Freddy Krueger and Colonel Sanders. Okay, so apparently Mr. Carney is the founder of Mr. Meaty, but was frozen in ice for many years until Josh and Parker melted him in the deep fryer, which is probably violating several health codes, to be honest. Anyway, the plot of the show revolves around the daily antics of Parker and Josh at work, and hilarity ensues. Or so that's the theory. The whole gimmick of the comedy of Mr. Meaty was that they were puppets doing gross out humor on a kids show. That in itself isn't what's bad. Shows like Rocko's Modern Life, All Real Monsters, and Ren and Stimpy are all cartoons with gross out humors, but they were all successes. Each one of those three Nicktoons are very memorable and nostalgic for many 90s kids growing up, though who not only remembers Mr. Meaty in the mid-2000s, but also enjoys it. I was a teenager at the time the show came out. I remember watching a couple episodes here and there, but I didn't really find it funny back then. Even when doing research for this video, I sat through almost every episode of the entire series and I couldn't get invested in any of the plots. Yes, you heard that right. I binge-watched almost all episodes of Mr. Meaty. Many mistakes were made in my life, and I'm dedicated to keeping the tradition, so don't judge me. There were only about 5 or 6 episodes I couldn't find online, though I wish there were more missing so I didn't have to waste all that time watching Parker turn into the Hulk and throw insults too lame to hurt a 4-year-old's feelings.
You so short you need a stool to pick your nose. Smoke weed every day.
And I think that's one of the problems with Mr. Meaty. The dialogue is not funny. They rely so much on the gross out humor and the slapstick and the fact they're all puppets that when it comes to simple jokes, they just fall flat. For example, in the episode Parkerina, Parker eats a burger with special sauce that turns him into a girl.
I mean, you gotta think about it. You can walk as one with the goddesses. You can go everywhere girls go. You can go to the girls' bathroom.
Ew! I can't go to the girls' bathroom. I just want to go back to being a guy!
It was a simpler time back then. It was during the age before the mass butt hurting of the mid-2010s came in. All the buzzwords and people from all sides of the debate going too extreme and getting offended about every little thing and crying outrage and start mass flagging or go on an internet witch hunt against all those who dare say a thing they disagree with or joke about something, because jokes are illegal now, so we gotta be careful what we say or else people will get their lives ruined for a simple thing said or done with no ill will intended. But for some reason it won't matter because context doesn't exist anymore, and we must now always bow down into the offended party and kiss their butt so they don't hurt anymore, because that's how I was taught about medicine in school. Kiss the boo-boo and make you feel better. But it doesn't feel better, it just makes your mouth taste like booty, sweat, and tears, and while it may be fun for some, it ain't for this Nick, that's for sure. Anyway... Parker accidentally turns into a girl and Josh convinces him, to befriend the girls around the so he can learn why they aren't falling for him. There isn't much of their usual humor in this episode. In fact, other than the transformation scene at the beginning, there really isn't much of Mr. Meaty's typical brand of comedy in it at all. It plays way too safe and relies heavily on stereotypes of valley girls, and when Parker goes into the girls' restroom and finds out that they have meetings for global pony petting issues, yes, that's a thing, it's just very anticlimactic and makes you think, really? The jokes fall flat, and it tries to be subtle and outrageous in its humor at the same time, and it just doesn't work. Oh sure, they talk about Josh and how he's been using the girls, which lead to a confrontation where he's supposed to learn about treating the girls right. But the lesson is then thrown out the window when Parker reverts back to being a boy, and so the girls attack Josh and then forces him to eat the burgers that have enough hormones for 50 HRT sessions.
Okay, Josh, are you okay? Josh!
Yes. Hold on a second, there's a girl.
Just call me Jocelyn.
Nothing was learned, there was no character development, and there was nothing really original in the writing for the episode. Now, it's possible to get away with things like that, but the writing has to be well done, and here it falls flat. And unfortunately, it's like that for almost every episode of the series. You can tell that they really rely on their gimmick of puppets doing gross-out humor to entertain children, but even that falls flat. Episode upon episode of lame slapstick and mediocre shock humor that's been done in other kids shows with better results made their way to TV screens each week. But is it all bad? Is there anything even halfway decent in Mr. Meaty? Strangely, I think so. And it's a thing that also tries to be subtle, but in this case it works. One recurring theme in the series is Parker struggling to stay a child and refusing to grow up when he's constantly being thrown curveballs like puberty and dating. He doesn't want to mature, he just wants to stay a kid and play with his action figures and have no cares or stress in the world. The problem is that's not how life works, and in several episodes he realizes that growing up isn't so bad. While the idea is overplayed in kids shows, it's actually one of the better parts of Mr. Meaty as it feels genuine and something people around Parker's age can relate to. It's still not done that well, but credit where due. It's decent and gets the lessons of growing up across in a way for young kids to understand. Take the episode Parker's First Kiss, for example. The plot revolves around Parker liking a girl but is too nervous to kiss her when they go out on a date because he's never kissed a girl before and doesn't know how to approach the situation. He tries to follow all of Josh's advice and list of things to do to get a kiss, but ultimately it doesn't go as planned because Parker messes things up. But the girl still kisses him in the end because she genuinely likes him. Like in Parkerina, this episode shifts away from its usual brand of humor, at least it almost completely does. But except for that one moment, it relies more on the story and ultimately it had potential to be good. This more drama-focused episode was handled much better than any of the plots and antics of this comedy show. The humor in this episode, for the most part, was more subtle and more grounded in reality, and it somewhat worked. Nothing was hilarious, but I wasn't cringing in severe agony every time a joke or visual gag was on screen. While I didn't find it funny, I can see why someone else probably would. Compare it with Parkerina, an episode that also tries subtlety but encased it in its usual over-the-top brand of humor. And you can see that when the writers dumbed down most of the slapstick and focus on smaller moments for their comedy, it actually somewhat works. In fact, the only downside to Parker's First Kiss was the only time a gross out gag was used in it. The other gags and comedy bits weren't exactly good, but the subtlety worked in its favor because it was more grounded in reality, and I think the show could have been much better if they stuck to this deviation instead of focusing on their usual slapstick. Unfortunately, there were only a couple of episodes like this, and they were late in the show's run before it ultimately got cancelled in 2009. In general, Mr. Meaty was a show that had mediocre comedy and writing, relied too heavily on outrageous circumstances to get cheap laughs and progress in the plot, and when it did show potential to be halfway decent, it was too late for the series to have any chance of success. And honestly, that's okay. It's a little show that's a footnote on Nickelodeon's history, and it's a bit of an oddity that's interesting to check out and see what went wrong in this concept. But if you watch long enough, you end up seeing a tiny, cheap-looking diamond in the rough that unfortunately never got a chance to develop in favor for the rest of the crap that Mr. Meaty is known for. If they didn't focus on the slapstick of Josh and Parker and and focus more on the development of the characters, it might have been an average show. But instead, we got gross out humor in the dull environment of and it will either be completely forgotten someday or just forever seen as that one really ugly puppet show Nickelodeon had for a short time. But that's just my opinion. What do you think? Did you like the show? Hate it? Did you even know this was a thing? What did you think of the concept of Mr. Meaty being about yet another show on Nickelodeon where the main characters are fast food employees, but this setting being Okay, I've had enough of this. Am I going to be interrupted every time I say Oh, that's it. Get back here.